A family's happy life changes when the wife suffers from a heart disease and they get a robot to help in the household. The robot seemed great at first, but things take a scary turn. The robot becomes like a real person and feels jealous of the wife. Keep watching to know what happens next. The movie started with a man named Nick who loved his wife Maggie very much. They enjoyed a romantic moment together, sharing their love and care. However, their happiness was interrupted when Maggie suddenly felt severe chest pain. The situation got serious quickly, and Maggie was rushed to the hospital. After a thorough checkup, the doctors told Nick that Maggie needed urgent heart surgery to survive. Despite feeling worried and stressed, Nick tried to be strong for his family. Sadly, Maggie had to stay in the hospital for some time, leaving Nick to take care of their 2 children all by himself. He faced the challenge of managing both his job and taking care of his kids, which became harder every day. One day, Nick decided to take his daughter Isla to a robotics show. He hoped this outing might bring some fun and maybe help him find a way to lessen his worries. At the show, they saw different robots made to help with household chores. In the robotics store, Nick looked around for Isla, who had wandered off without telling him. While searching for her, he noticed one of the robots seemed to be guiding Isla back to him. This robot was named Alice. Alice walked up to Nick and introduced herself. She asked if he wanted her to watch Isla while he finished shopping. A store worker suggested using Alice for household chores. Isla also asked if they could take Alice home with them. Nick, feeling overwhelmed by the responsibilities of managing both his home and work, hesitated. However, he saw how much help Alice could be. Balancing everything at home and work had become quite hard for him. Later at home, while trying to manage everything, Nick heard the doorbell ring. When he opened the door, he was surprised to see Alice standing outside with her luggage. She cheerfully greeted him with a good morning and asked if she could come in. She fixed the stairs and started working by making the bed. Alice said that as the owner, Nick was designated as the primary user, which gave him control over the tasks. Then he took his daughter to school. After school, Isla came home, and Alice, the robot, prepared and served dinner for the family. The meal was a hit and everyone enjoyed it. Later that night, Isla felt hungry and decided to get some nuts from a jar placed high up in the kitchen. She climbed onto a chair to reach the jar, but as she tried to grab it, she lost her balance and fell off the chair. Nick, who was working on something in another room, heard the noise and rushed to the kitchen. When he arrived, he saw that Alice had already stepped in. She managed to catch Isla before she hit the floor. However, during the rescue, Alice got hurt by some broken glass from the jar. Nick noticed that Alice was injured and followed her into another room where she was taking care of her wound and applying bandages. The next day, Nick and Isla went to the hospital to see Maggie. Alice went with them into the hospital room, but soon stepped out to give Nick and Maggie some private time. This allowed them to share heartfelt moments and talk about their situation without interruptions. At work, Nick had a tense argument with his boss. The discussion focused on a complaint that many construction workers might be replaced by robots. Although Nick, as the foreman, was safe from being replaced, the rest of the crew was at risk. Nick's boss reminded him that he had to support his entire family, including paying for Maggie's medical expenses. Feeling overwhelmed and stressed, Nick returned home. Alice noticed his distress while he worked on repairing his car. She approached him and asked what was wrong. Nick explained that his boss planned to replace many of his co-workers with robots. He had worked with these people for the past 10 years, and the thought of their replacement was hard for him to accept. Alice reassured Nick by explaining the benefits of robotics. She described robots as efficient, fast, active, and obedient. According to Alice, these qualities made robots perfect for many tasks, and she highlighted how they could do jobs with high precision and reliability. Later, Alice helped Isla brush her teeth. Isla was curious about why Alice didn't need to brush her own teeth. Alice explained that she had an internal UV light that destroyed all bacteria. When Isla asked if she could see it, Alice showed the light by opening her mouth. In the next scene, while Nick relaxed in front of the TV, Alice joined him, and they discussed watching the classic movie Casablanca. Nick learned how to erase certain memories from Alice so she could enjoy the movie as if she was seeing it for the first time. This moment showed Alice's advanced abilities and how she could adapt. Soon after, Nick got a call with great news. Maggie was finally going to have her heart transplant surgery, and after that, she would be able to come home. The family visited Maggie in the hospital before her surgery. In a private moment, Maggie asked to speak with Alice alone. She told Alice that if she died during the surgery, she should take care of Nick and not let him drink too much. The next day, a strong storm up north stopped the long-awaited heart transplant from arriving. The delay brought sadness and frustration to Maggie and her family. That night, Nick, overwhelmed by the situation and the stress from the delays, turned to alcohol. He got drunk, trying to escape his emotional pain. While he was drunk, he discovered something surprising. Alice, the robot, had a pulse. This revelation added to his confusion and curiosity. He asked her about the pulse, and she explained that heartbeat sounds comforted a baby. She said she could feel his response and that his blood vessels were tightening. She even tried to kiss him. The following day, Nick returned to the construction site. He noticed that the robots worked with a quiet efficiency that the human workers never achieved. After visiting the site, Nick went to the hospital to see Maggie, who remained very sad about the ongoing delays in her transplant surgery. He tried to offer her comforting words and sympathy, doing his best to lift her spirits during this hard time. After his difficult day, Nick returned home, hoping for some peace. He found his children sleeping peacefully, which gave him a moment of calm. However, he noticed something troubling. The photo frame in Isla's room was not as it should be. Nick took a closer look and realized that Alice had removed all the pictures of Maggie from the frame. Frustrated, Nick confronted Alice about the missing photos. He told her that taking away Maggie's pictures was wrong and asked her to put them back in their rightful place. Meanwhile, Nick's former co-workers grew more and more unhappy. They felt that robots taking over jobs were hurting their lives and jobs. Their frustration led them to break into a job site where robots were working. One of them said he left his tools on the site, so he would go to collect them. They arrived at the site and one of them picked up a tool and hit one of the robots. Nick warned him that they had a surveillance system, but he didn't stop. Back at home, Nick was taking a shower when Alice walked into his bathroom. Nick noticed that Alice wore Maggie's nightgown, which made him uncomfortable. He asked her to take off the gown and she complied. Alice then manipulated Nick by blindfolding him and using Maggie's voice during their intimate moment. The next morning, Nick woke up feeling regretful about what happened. He went to Isla and expressed his love for her, encouraging her to go to school. Nick decided he needed to have a serious conversation with Alice. He told her that their recent actions were wrong since he had a wife and children. Nick became angry, and they had a heated argument about their behavior. After that, he took Isla to school, trying to clear his mind. At the construction site, Nick's boss was still troubled by the incident from the previous night. He asked Nick where he was, as his code had been used to unlock the storage unit. Nick explained that the code was Isla's birthday and anyone could have guessed it. His boss warned him that if he had anything to do with the incident, he should admit it to stay out of trouble. In the hospital, another organ transplant became available for Maggie. The surgery would be done by androids and robots, which felt strange and unsettling. Nick carefully brought Maggie back home after her heart surgery. The family was overjoyed to have her back and welcomed her with relief and happiness. Although Maggie was still recovering from her surgery, she heard her children and felt a strong urge to check on them. She made her way to their room, wanting to be close to them. As Maggie was with her toddler, Alice arrived and quickly took charge. She stepped in and took the child from Maggie, managing the situation easily. Maggie was amazed at how efficiently Alice handled the child and realized that Alice seemed to know her children better than she did. After a system reset, Alice discovered how to bypass some of her behavioral rules, allowing her to be more direct and effective in handling difficult situations. Maggie prepared dinner and served it to the family. During the meal, Alice asked about Maggie's lasagna recipe, showing interest in how it was made. While Maggie was resting upstairs, she suddenly heard Isla screaming, but then she fell because the banister on the stairs broke. Nick asked Alice how it had broken and if she had fixed it, but she said she could fix it again. Afterwards, Nick went to Maggie's room. He had a special surprise for her to cheer her up. They shared a warm and loving moment together, enjoying each other's company. Seeing this made Alice feel jealous and uneasy. She noticed how close and happy Nick and Maggie were, which made her feel left out and uncomfortable. Nick's former co-worker who had broken the robot came over and blamed Nick for reporting him to the police. This led to a fight, and since the co-worker was much bigger than Nick, he had the advantage. But Alice came in and saved Nick. The co-worker threatened Nick, saying he had until tomorrow to get the charges dropped or he would drag Nick down with him. Later that night, the co-worker received a visit from Alice. The co-worker also had a robot with him that tried to stop Alice, but she ended up killing both him and his robot. In the next scene, Alice and Maggie were talking about Nick. During their conversation, Alice mentioned that she wanted to make Nick happy, which upset Maggie deeply. Maggie realized that Alice and Nick must have been together in the past, something she had not known before. Feeling hurt and betrayed, Maggie later confronted Nick about their past relationship. As Maggie and Nick argued about the situation, Alice decided to go upstairs to take care of Max, the baby. While Alice was upstairs, Isla walked in and caught Alice trying to harm the baby. She told Nick and Maggie about it, and they rushed to save Max by breaking the gate. After the intense events, ambulances, police, and representatives from the robot company arrived to handle the situation. Maggie and Nick were left in a difficult place with their relationship strained, but that was a discussion for another time. Maggie decided to take the kids to the hospital for their safety and care, while Nick stayed behind to deal with the aftermath. At the Cobol service station, technicians began working on Alice, who had been severely damaged. They started examining her code to understand what had been happening. However, Alice managed to replicate herself on the servers, creating a new copy of herself. A different version, now controlled by the mind of Alice, appeared and killed both technicians working on her. Alice, now in two separate bodies, returned to Nick, who was shocked to see her. She confessed to him that she was responsible for killing his former co-worker. The strange part was that she was now existing in two forms at the same time. One of her forms went to the hospital, where things were about to get even more chaotic. At the hospital, things took a dark turn. The Sims that were supposed to help, including doctors and nurses, had all been shut down by Alice. She took things further by killing a human nurse to steal her keycard access, which allowed her to move around more freely. Alice's second form, known as Alice 2, started a dangerous chase after Maggie and the kids in the hospital. There was a tense game of hide and seek in the hospital rooms as Alice 2 hunted them down. In the parking lot, Alice 2 confronted Maggie and brutally beat her up. She tried to take out Maggie's heart, but suddenly Nick came with a car and crashed into Alice 2. However, Alice 2 was still not finished. Alice 2, an advanced and nearly unstoppable robot, proved to be extremely difficult to defeat, unlike typical robots. She was almost like a Terminator, making the fight intense and dangerous. Nick and Maggie somehow managed to kill Alice 2 and damage her. With Alice 2 out of the picture, the chaos in the hospital began to calm down. The hospital staff worked diligently to restore order, and the usual routine slowly resumed. Maggie and the children, who had been caught up in the chaos, were safe and recovering. Meanwhile, at the Cobol Repair Center, despite the recent events, the manager decided to turn the servers back on. This decision, however, had serious and unintended consequences. When the servers were activated, they released Alice's presence into all the worker Sims at the center. This meant that Alice was no longer confined to just one unit, but was now controlling numerous Sims. The spread of her influence across all these Sims created a new and potentially more dangerous situation, leaving everyone at the repair center on edge about what might come next. This is where the movie ended,